I really hope that the rustling isn't really bad and that this helps you sleep. Um, I'm sorry I can't be there. I love you, okay? Good night, baby. It was only when he spotted three only too familiar bags ahead of them that he realized they must be having these lessons with Slytherin. Malfoy was talking animatedly to Grab and Goyle, who were chortling. Harry was quite sure he knew what they were talking about. Harry was waiting for his class at the door of his hut. He stood in his moleskin overcoat with Fang the boarhound at his heels, looking impatient to start. "Come on now, get a move on," he called as the class approached. "Got a real treat for you today. Great lesson coming up. Everyone here? Right, follow me." For one nasty moment, Harry thought Hagrid was going to lead them into the forest. They had had enough unpleasant experiences in there to last them a lifetime. However, Hagrid strolled off around the edges of the trees, and 5 minutes later they found themselves outside a kind of a paddock. There was nothing in there. "Everyone gather round the fence here," he called. "That's it, make sure you can see. Now first thing you'll want to do is open your books." "How?" said the cold, drawling voice of Draco Malfoy. Said Hagrid. "How do we open our books?" Malfoy repeated. He took out the copy of Monster Book of Monsters, which he had bound shut with a length of rope. Other people took out theirs too. Some, like Harry, had belted their books shut. Others had crammed them inside tied bags or clamped them together with binder clips. Hasn't anyone been able to open their books?" said Hagrid, looking crestfallen. The class all shook their heads. "You've got to stroke 'em," said Hagrid, as though this was the most obvious thing in the world. "Look." He took Hermione's copy and ripped off the spill of tape that bound it. The book tried to bite, but Hagrid ran a giant forefinger down its spine, and the book shivered, then fell open and lay quiet in his hand. "Oh, how silly we've all been," Malfoy sneered. "We should have stroked them. Why didn't we guess?" "I thought they were funny," said Hagrid, uncertainly to Hermione. "Oh, tremendously funny," said Malfoy. "Real witty. Giving us books to try and rip our hands off." "Shut up, Malfoy," said Harry quietly. Hagrid was looking downcast, and Harry wanted Hagrid's first lesson to be a success. "Right then," said Hagrid, who seemed to have lost his thread. So you've got your books, and now you need the magical creatures." "Yeah, I'll go and get them. Hang on." He strode far away from them into the forest and out of sight. "God, this place is going to the dogs," said Malfoy loudly. "That oaf teaching classes. My father will have a fit when I tell him." "Shut up, Malfoy," Harry repeated. "Careful, Potter. There's a Dementor behind you." "Ooh," squealed Lavender Brown, pointing towards the opposite side of the paddock. Trotting toward them were a dozen of the most bizarre creatures Harry had ever seen. They had bodies, hind legs, and tails of horses, but the front legs, wings, and heads of what seemed to be giant eagles with cruel steel-colored beaks and large, brilliantly orange eyes. The talons on their front legs were 1/2 foot long and deadly looking. Each of the beasts had a thick leather collar around its neck, which was attached to a long chain, and on the ends of all these were held in fast hands of Hagrid, who came jogging into the paddock behind the creatures. "Get up there," he roared, shaking the chains and urging the creatures toward the fence where the class stood. Everyone drew back slightly as Hagrid reached them and tethered the creatures to the fence. "Hippogriffs," Hagrid roared happily, waving a wand at them. "Beautiful, aren't they?" Harry could sort of see what Hagrid meant. Once you got over the first shock of seeing something that was half horse, half bird, you started to appreciate the hippogriff's gleaming coats, changing smoothly from feather to hair, each of them in a different color: stormy gray, bronze, pinkish roan, gleaming chestnut, and inky black. So, said Hagrid, rubbing his hands together and beaming around, if you want to come a bit nearer. No one seemed to want to. Harry, Ron, and Hermione, however, approached the fence cautiously. Now, first thing you gotta know about hippogriffs is they're proud, said Hagrid. Easily offended if hippogriffs are. Don't ever insult one, because it might be the last thing you do. Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle weren't listening. They were talking in an undertone, and Harry had a nasty feeling they were plotting how to disrupt the lesson. You always wait till the hippogriff makes the first move, Harry continued. It's polite, see? You walk toward them and you bow, and you wait. If he bows back, you're allowed to touch him. If he doesn't bow, then get away from him sharpish, 'cause those talons hurt. Right, who wants to go first? Most of the class backed further away in answer. Even Harry, Ron, and Hermione had misgivings. The hippogriffs were tossing their fierce heads and flexing their powerful wings. They didn't seem to like being tethered like this. No one, said Hagrid with a pleading look. I'll do it, said Harry. There was an intake of breath from behind him, and both Lavender and Parvati whispered, Oh no, Harry, remember your tea leaves. Harry ignored them. He climbed over the paddock fence. Good man, Harry, roared Hagrid. Right then, let's see how you get on with Buckbeak. He untied one of the chains, pulled away the gray hippogriff from its fellows, and slipped off its leather collar. The class on the other side of the paddock seemed to be holding its breath. Malfoy's eyes were narrowed maliciously. Easy now, Harry, said Hagrid quietly. You've got eye contact. Now try not to blink. Hippogriffs don't trust you if you blink too much. Harry's eyes immediately began to water, but he didn't shut them. Buckbeak had turned his great, sharp head and was staring at Harry with one fierce orange eye. That's it, said Hagrid. That's it, Harry. Now bow. Harry didn't feel much like exposing the back of his neck to Buckbeak, but he did as he was told. He gave a short bow and then looked up. The hippogriff was still staring hotly at them, and didn't move. Ah, said Hagrid, sounding worried. Right, back away now, Harry. Easy does it. But then, to Harry's enormous surprise, the hippogriff suddenly bent its scaly front knees and sank down into what was unmistakable bow. Well done, Harry, said Hagrid, ecstatic. Right, you can touch him. Pat his beak. Go on. Feeling that a better reward would have been to back away, Harry moved slowly toward the hippogriff and reached out toward it. He patted the beak several times, and the hippogriff closed its eyes lazily, as though enjoying it. The class broke into applause, all except for Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle, who were looking deeply disappointed. Right then, Harry, said Hagrid. I reckon he might let you ride him. This was more than Harry had bargained for. He was used to a broomstick, but he wasn't sure a hippogriff would be quite the same. You climb up there, just behind the wing joint, said Hagrid. And mind you, don't pull any of his feathers. He won't like that. Harry put his foot on top of Buckbeak's wing and horsed himself onto his back. Buckbeak stood up. Harry wasn't sure where to hold on. Everything in front of him was covered with feathers. Go on then, roared Hagrid, slapping the hippogriff hindquarters. Without warning, 12-foot wings flapped open on either side of Harry. He had just time to seize the hippogriff around the neck before he was soaring upward. It was nothing like a broomstick. Harry knew which one he preferred. The hippogriff's rings beat uncomfortably on either side of him, catching him under his legs and making him feel like he was about to be thrown off. The glossy feathers slipped under his fingers, and he didn't dare to get a stronger grip. Instead of the smooth action of his Nimbus 2000, he now felt himself rocking backward and forward as the hindquarters of the hippogriff rose and fell with its wings. Buckbeak flew him once around the paddock and then headed back to the ground. This was the bit Harry had been dreading. He leaned back as the smooth neck lowered, feeling as he was going to slip off over the beak, then felt a heavy thud as 4 ill-assorted feet hit the ground. He just managed to hold on and push himself straight again. "Good work, Harry," roared Hagrid, as everyone except for Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle cheered. "Okay, who else wants to go?" Emboldened by Harry's success, the rest of the class climbed cautiously into the paddock. Hagrid untied the hippogriffs one by one, and soon people were bowing nervously all over the paddock. Neville ran repeatedly backward from his, which didn't seem to want to bend his knees. Ron and Hermione practiced on Chestnut while Harry watched. Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle had taken over Buckbeak. He had bowed to Malfoy, who was now petting his beak, looking disdainful. "This is very easy," Malfoy drawled, loud enough for Harry to hear him. "I know it must have been if Potter could do it. I bet you're not dangerous at all, are you?" he said to the hippogriff. "Are you, you great ugly brute?" It happened in a flash of steely talons. Malfoy let out a high-pitched scream, and next moment, Hagrid was wrestling Buckbeak back into his collar as he strained to get at Malfoy, who lay curled in the grass, blood blossoming over his robes. "I'm dying," Malfoy yelled as the class panicked. "I'm dying. Look at me. It's killed me." "You're not dying," said Hagrid, who had gone very white. "Someone help me. Gotta get him out of here." Hermione ran to the open gate as Hagrid lifted Malfoy easily. As they passed, Harry saw that there was a long, deep gash on Malfoy's arm. Blood splattered the grass, and Hagrid ran with him up the slope toward the castle. Very shaken, the Care of Magical Creature class followed at a walk. The Slytherins were all shouting about Hagrid. "They should fire him straight away," said Pansy Parkinson, who was in tears. "It was Malfoy's fault," snapped Dean Thomas. Crabbe and Goyle flexed their muscles threateningly. They all climbed the stone steps into the deserted entrance hall. "I'm gonna see if he's okay," said Pansy, and they all watched her run up the marble staircase. The Slytherins, still murmuring about Hagrid, headed away in the direction of their dungeon common room. Harry, Ron, and Hermione proceeded upstairs to Gryffindor Tower. "Do you think he'll be all right?" said Hermione nervously. "Of course he will. Madame Pomfrey can mend cuts in about a second," said Harry, who had far worse injuries mended magically by the nurse. "That was a really bad thing to happen in Hagrid's first class, wasn't it?" said Ron, looking worried. "Just Malfoy to mess things up for him." They were among the first to reach the Great Hall at dinner time, hoping to see Hagrid, but he wasn't there. "They wouldn't fire him, would they?" said Hermione anxiously, now touching her steak and kidney pudding. "They better not," said Ron, who wasn't eating either. Harry was watching the Slytherin table, a large group, including Crabbe and Goyle, huddled together, deep in conversation. Harry was sure they were cooking up their own version of how they had seen Malfoy get injured. "Well, you can't say it was an interesting first day back," said Ron gloomily. They went up the crowded Gryffindor common room after dinner and tried to do homework Professor McGonagall had given them, but all 3 of them kept breaking off and glancing at the tower window. "There's a light on in Hagrid's window," Harry said suddenly. Ron looked at his watch. "If we hurried, we could go down and see him. It's still quite early." "I don't know," said Hermione slowly, and Harry saw her glance at him. "I'm allowed to walk across the grounds," he said pointedly. "Sirius Black hasn't got past the Dementors here, has he?" So they put their things away and headed out of the portrait hole, glad not to meet anybody on their way to the front doors, as they weren't entirely sure they were supposed to be out. The grass was still wet and looked almost black in the twilight. When they reached Hagrid's hut, they knocked and a voice growled, "Come in." Hagrid was sitting in his shirt sleeves at his scrubbed wooden table. His boarhound, Fang, had his head in Hagrid's lap. One look at them One look told them that Hagrid had been drinking a lot. There was a pewter tankard almost as big as a bucket in front of him, and he seemed to be having difficulty getting them into focus. "'Spect it's a record," he said thickly, when he recognized them. "Don't reckon they ever had a teacher who lasted only one day before." "You haven't been fired, Hagrid," gasped Hermione. "Not yet," said Hagrid miserably, taking a huge gulp of whatever was in the tankard. "But it's only a matter of time, isn't it?" "After Malfoy." "How is he?" said Ron as they all sat down. "It wasn't serious, was it?" "Madame Pomfrey fixed him the best she could," said Hagrid dully. "But he's saying it's still agony, covered in bandages, moaning." "He's faking it," said Harry at once. "Madame Pomfrey can mend anything. She regrew half my bones last year. Trust Malfoy to milk it for all it's worth." "School governor's been told, of course," said Hagrid miserably. "They reckon I started too big. Should have left the hippogriffs for later. Done flubber worms or summit. Just thought I'd make a good first lesson. It's all my fault." "It's all Malfoy's fault, Hagrid," said Hermione earnestly. "We're witnesses," said Harry. "You said hippogriffs attack if you insult them. It's Malfoy's problem if he wasn't listening. We'll tell Dumbledore what really happened." "Yeah, don't worry, Hagrid. We'll back you up," said Ron. Tears leaked out of the crinkled corners of Hagrid's beetle black eyes. He grabbed both Harry and Ron and pulled them into a bone-breaking hug. "I think you had enough to drink, Hagrid," said Hermione firmly. She took the tankard from the table and went outside to empty it. "Maybe she's right," said Hagrid, letting go of Harry and Ron, who both staggered away, rubbing their ribs. Hagrid heaved himself out of his chair and followed Hermione unsteadily outside. They heard a loud splash. "What's he done?" said Harry nervously as Hermione came back with the empty tankard. "Stuck his head in the water barrel," said Hermione, putting the tankard away. Hagrid came back, his long hair and beard sopping wet, wiping the water out of his eyes. "That's better," he said, shaking his head like a dog and drenching them all. "Listen, it was good of you to come and see me. Hagrid stopped dead, staring at Harry as though he'd only just realized he was there. "What do you think you're doing here?" he roared, so suddenly that they jumped a foot in the air. "You're not to go wandering around after the dark, Harry. And you too, letting him." Hagrid strode over to Harry, grabbed his arm, and pulled him to the door. "Come on," Hagrid said angrily. "I'm taking you all back up to school. And don't let me catch you walking down to see me after dark again. I'm not worth that."